The following podcast is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to persons living or allegedly dead is a complete coincidence. You'll pay no attention to any of it. Everything discussed is a lie. Even this disclaimer. You have been warned. Now, it's time for...
Don't shoot the messenger.
That's right, welcome back to another episode of Don't Shoot the Messenger. As always, I'm Chris Dickens alongside my
Jinx, just Jinx.
And we are going to dive into, it's kind of, I guess you would say, a part 2 / epilogue to Philadelphia experiment, would you say?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it might be even considered a sequel or spin-off.
Well, if you don't know what we're talking about the Montauk Project and Camp Hero.
Montauk is another kind of like the Area 51 of the East Coast. Another secret facility that has a lot of mystery surrounding it that people aren't allowed into and was actually built underground.
Yes, and it was a huge facility built underground. Like, we talked about the Denver airport in episode 1 of this season, and we said that was big. This makes that look like it's Rhode Island to United States.
Yeah, this is a big, huge project that ties into a lot of conspiracies and different things. Everything from psychic abilities, teleportation, time travel, aliens, telekinesis, you name it. I think this story's got a little bit of everything. It's kind of crazy. And are we going to have enough time to dig really well into this episode or into this topic in one episode?
We'll dig into this as much as possible. I mean, so let's just start off that, Montauk's like a very, very, very tiny town.
A hamlet, if you will.
Yes, it's not even considered, 2,500 people there?
I think currently it's 3,000, but at the time that this all happened, it was probably less than 2,000.
Yeah, so it's an extremely small town that just happened to have like a giant satellite and some government base there. And they said they were using it for radio, the giant satellite or radio tower at Camp Hero. Camp Hero is the place. It's the SAGE radar tower, 120-foot, 70-ton dish. It was believed to transmit radio signals from 420 to 450 megahertz range, which is, I guess, can penetrate the human consciousness, if you will.
If you want to believe the conspiracy, this is where it's going to. This experiment also included mind control.
Yes, it was. So this was a way to make them susceptible to mind control. This experiment had far and wide. If you can think of any really conspiracy, it had to do with aliens. This place had to do with mind control, time travel, psychic abilities. It was like you said, the Area 51 of the Northeast.
Even to the point of controlling people's emotions. I mean, to make a whole town feel happy or sad or, cry or angry. That's kind of crazy. Makes you wonder about mob mentality, right? Is it something in the air?
Yeah. It was so they were choosing people on their psychic abilities at first. They had the Montauk chair. And is an interface device that was used to boost a test subject's psychic ability in order to help them perform a variety of tasks.
So, yeah, they had to have somebody who already possessed some form of psychic ability, but this would amplify it to make it even stronger.
Yeah, it's just very interesting and very weird to think of these types of things. You're wondering why, nobody's ever come out and talked about it. One, it's the government. Two, a lot of people have come out and said that they were mind-washed or brainwashed and that have had flashbacks to it.
Yeah, because you got to wonder, with any kind of tampering with the brain, eventually the brain repairs itself over time. So it makes sense that people would start to remember over time.
Yeah, it first started out with psychic abilities, and it all stemmed from actually the Philadelphia experiment and with the ship disappearing and then reappearing and then disappearing and then reappearing again. And it kind of started with time travel, but then it divulged into psychic abilities as well. And so we're going to touch on the psychic abilities first. So it was these psychic abilities would actually create time glitches. So somebody would get so powerful from the chair that it would
cause glitches in time.
It make it seem like they're into a false reality, almost a parallel dimension. That they would rip a hole in space and time and go into a separate dimension. Which
they kind of stopped that part, and then they ended up making a second and third chair. One of which was in London along the Thames River, if I remember correctly.
Now, let's get into the size of this place. This place was huge. So you entered in Montauk, but it would go down to as low as you can go in the Earth's crust, and then have trains that would travel across the globe to different parts of the country, where there were people who said after they had their mind wiped, they would remember being taken down this huge elevator shaft going down 15 flights and then being put on a train and sent miles and miles and thousands of miles away from where they were. And all of these people were children usually when they would have this happen. So that's why they're coming out now, is they were children. So their parents believed they were in school, but the government would go and take them out of school and send them here, and it would be a 4 or 5 hour trip there, 4 or 5 hour day, they'd say, where they go and they'd take these trains and then end up in a doctor's office, and the doctor would end up giving them like a shot and see how they would react to it psychically or in any sort of way that would help them with their time travel. Because that was a big part of it, was once the caused time glitches, they focused on the time travel of it. They would do that and then just be sent back into the real world and have their mind wiped and told what they did for that day. And they would be like, oh, I went on a field trip, or, oh, this is what I learned.
And this was back in a time when people actually still trusted the government.
So, there were secret missions, too, with time travel that they would have children and homeless people go on.
And, of course, because who's going to believe a child if they do talk about it? They just think it's imagination. And homeless people, no one's noticing no one notices when they go missing if they don't return. It's just assumed that they wandered off, they died, or, something happened to them. They moved to a different town. It was a lot harder to track down people back then. So a homeless person, a vagabond, vagrant, you're not going to be as noticed as that they completely disappeared as now. And with kids, you send your kid to school, and if the school is involved with it, how are you going to know your kid wasn't in school? Especially if your kid's mind was erased about it in the first place, much less believe your child. You would think they would choose kids who would be less believed.
Yeah, so the scientists at Montauk would spend weeks at a time prepping these homeless people and children to get them ready for their time travel missions. And they would refer to it as a time tunnel. And it literally looked like a tunnel, but they were not structurally sound. And they would just send the homeless people at first to see if they would return. Just be like, hey, could you make it back?
And a lot of these people didn't make it back, too. It's another thing to note, whether they chose not to come back or were not able to come back. A lot of them did not come back.
Yeah, and they wanted to see if there was any physical distortions from them, because traveling through time, you have to imagine there's some sort of molecular disdainment to it.
Disturbance or change, yeah, definitely.
You have to be pulled apart and then put back together.
Yeah, taken to your base form and molecules and reassembled. So matter rearranging itself may not come back in the same form, or things might be missing or interchanged with what you come in contact with. It's kind of crazy. Think The Fly, right? Like he's part fly, part man. But this was time travel, so who knows what could have happened to these people.
So they would send all these homeless people that would, who would, just like you stated earlier, who would notice a homeless person being gone. And if they did coming back and we're talking about time traveling, you just brush it off. Like, you're a crazy person. Get away from me. Here's $1. Shut up and leave me alone. The homeless were not treated well. Not that they're treated well today, but they were treated much worse back then.
Oh, yeah. It's like nobody respected them, and they got a bad rap. And, how many times have you seen old TV shows with homeless people on the corner predicting the end of times or different crazy conspiracies and stuff? And who's going to believe the crazy person on the corner?
Yeah. So then this led to, after they figured out they could send people and have them come back, they had what they called the Boy Brigade, not to be confused with the Catholic Church.
This wasn't an early form of boy bands. Okay.
It was all male, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Caucasians. In order to travel through time, they would pick the children that were naive with naive sensibilities and open to like find out what is on the other side of these tunnels. They wanted the kids that would just just go. They're just like, you want to know what? I'm going in. And the ones who were fearless and just wanted to see what the other side tells. And they would send them thousands of years into the future and to the past. They would have them go examine cities that were ruined.
One as far as 6,000 AD to investigate a ruined city, to examine a statue of a horse. That was something that struck me. There's a lot of statues of horses. Why specifically the statue of a horse? That I don't know. There's no reason or any explanation that I found, but it just kind of struck me, the horse thing, because of Lucifer. I was talking about the statue at Denver Airport, and you see statues of horses in a lot of places. So, and the Trojan horse. So how is this horse significant?
I want you to, sit there and wonder, though, why would they pick blue-haired, blonde-eyed boys?
Blue-haired, blonde-eyed boys? Blonde-haired, blue-eyed boys.
Yeah,
Well, because at the time, that was like the most common or most the one that people would trust.
Send them during World War II to find out what Hitler was doing.
True, yeah, because Hitler did have his experiments that he did in trying to raise an all-Aryan race of blonde-haired, blue-eyed children. So
okay, so you send a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy out into Germany and have him, just happen to be around somewhere Hitler was and report things and come back. And so they get more detailed reports on what they were actually doing. History is not fully a full, complete story. Not everybody knows exactly everything that happened in history. So why not send children to places where you don't know the answers of everything? Have them go to the world wars. Have them go into the future and find out what is happening, how we can prevent it. Send them back thousands upon thousands of years to know exactly what ancient Greece was like.
They didn't just travel in the world that we know it and through time, but they also traveled through space, traveling to ancient Greek, 100,000 years back to collect light and dark matter. You've got them, into the future, checking out these ruined cities and this horse, but also going on trips to Mars. Some of the stuff is like so far out. I can't even grasp how, if it is a conspiracy, who thought of all this stuff and put this all in one location, that all of these things happen in this one location. And that's a lot to tie to one space, as opposed to thoughts being spread out, at different locations or different projects or things like that. That makes it, I think, a little more credible, the fact that people all claim it all happened at the same location.
Yeah, so these trips to Mars were to study, and they would go back in time to trips to Mars to see if there were civilizations, and certain people who have come out and said they are part of the Montauk Project said, yeah, there were civilizations there, and yeah, we met them.
A lot of conspiracy theories, like this one, you always got to take them all with a grain of salt as to whether or not they actually existed. This one is one you kind of want to believe, I think, because of just how extravagant the theories and everything that happened there. So things of science fiction novels.
It's hard to come up with stuff like this. I mean, it really is. And unless there's some sort of truth behind it. I know
I've in some of these, like the mind control through the radio tower, that is something I remember seeing in an episode of X-Files way back, obviously way back since X-Files was on a long time ago. But I remember the Scully and Mulder visiting a town where the townspeople were being controlled by radio waves. So, does that stem from this Montauk Project? Is that where they got that idea and concept from? I'm sure a lot of episodes of X-Files were probably inspired by this conspiracy.
Now, this is where people are going to be like, all right, yeah, whatever, Chris. They would travel. So I mentioned the alternate universes, and they would travel to them in the parallel dimensions. And people who came back said it was almost exactly like Star Wars.
I didn't see anything with exact details, but yeah, they said with Star Wars with the battles and things going on. And can you imagine TIE fighters in real life?
So it wasn't like that, but it was like world governments and galactic governments and actually different species of aliens living among each other.
On Doctor Who.
like on Doctor Who, but like how Star Wars had the Old Republic. It was kind of like that, where they had, or the Galactic Empire. Something like, it was just one world government had control, and There was an emperor, and he controlled the entire universe. It's not necessarily like, oh, I'm not talking lightsabers and TIE fighters and X-Wings.
But, you wouldn't want to imagine a world like Star Wars without the lightsabers and the TIE fighters, because what's the fun in that? But yeah, I get what you're saying. It's pretty amazing to think a bunch of alien races getting together and getting along, hopefully better than the world we know.
Well, it's not necessarily even getting along. It was kind of like I said, like a galactic empire. So it was like the Sith Lord and Darth Vader running the show, and then everyone kind of else fell in line.
That could be part of it. But then, also having the Senate and all that with different alien species getting together to talk. But yeah, it's an interesting concept that, the multi-universes and the future universes.
It is definitely an interesting concept. And of course, they shut it down in about 1990. And speculation is because, when you have a tear in hyperspace and in time and space, you have a tear in time and space, that's not going to be that great to leave it just continuing, It was shut down at around 1990.
Was it 1990? I thought it was in the 80s still.
No, you're correct. They ended up shutting it down in 1983.
And I think you neglected to talk about the one thing that this has in common, or how it ties in with our last episode on the Philadelphia experiment.
Alfred Bielek is one of the still survivors of the Philadelphia experiment, and he was also one guy who was also used to travel throughout time in the Montauk experiment.
Which I guess there were issues with the Philadelphia, or the USS Eldridge, when it would go invisible and stuff. Things with that were messing with the radio waves and stuff needed for the Montauk Project. So they actually had to send somebody back in time to dismantle and shut down the USS Eldridge's cloaking things in order for the Montauk Project to continue.
Everyone thinks time is linear, and
it's a ball of string, all timey-wimey.
We just view it as linear just because we have a past and a present. But, if you go into, time jumping and time travel, it no longer becomes linear. It becomes circular almost.
And I believe it was the USS Eldridge that was causing the hole in the hyperspace that was causing the issues. So, it was one interrupting the other. And there was one officer actually jumped overboard and was thrown through time to 1983, ended up on Long Island. Like, that's kind of crazy. Can you imagine being on the USS Eldridge back in, the 43, and then all of a sudden you're in 1983? It says here that jumped over the side of the ship expecting to hit water. We didn't. We wound up in 1983, August 12th, on the shores, if you will, of another project called the Phoenix Project on Montauk, Long Island. At night, inside the inner burr field fences, the guards came and grabbed us and took us downstairs. That's a quote from Bielek. That was the officer who jumped ship and ended up in 1983.
And that's when they decided to shut it down a few months later.
I found interesting and fascinating with these chairs that enhance the psychic abilities. One person was actually able to make things like everything from a watch to a bike to, some say, even a building appear, and just create them out of nothing. Found that fascinating. I wonder, if how much truth there is to that. And if not, who thought of that? Because these are some creative conspiracies. There's a lot of thought put into this one.
It's a group of people that are claiming this. It's not just one person. It's a group of people that said that they were a part of this. So, you guys let us know what you think about this. If you have more, let us know. We're going to come back to this because we've just kind of scratched the surface on it. We'll come back in another episode. Yeah,
if you want to give us any thoughts on it or anything you've heard or want us to bring up next time we bring up the subject, of course, you can email us at DSTM@thejustdon'tnetwork.com or Chris@thejustdon'tnetwork.com. We'd love to hear from you and see what you have to say about this conspiracy.
Yeah. So when we come back, though, a little bit of a magical mystery, I guess you'd say.
Creating a podcast like Don't Shoot the Messenger can be a lot of hard work, but Anchor helps make our job a little bit easier. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. So, if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast.
Welcome back to Don't Shoot the Messenger.
Yeah, just before the break, you were saying you got mystery topic for us today, something magical. And, most of us have heard of Merlin the Magician, of course, the magician and head wizard for King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. But you have an actual conspiracy theory having to do with Merlin. Am I hearing this correct?
So Merlin was first introduced in the late 1300s. Merlin was first introduced in the writings of Geoffrey of Monmouth, and he wrote about the kings of England and the royalty of England. We all know the story of Arthur. You know of the character of Merlin, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding Merlin and if he was actually a real person or if he was a myth or a fairy tale or just somebody who's kind of taken multiple parts from different people and made into this person. Merlin was considered Arthur's teacher and mentor. I mean, it's been shown that Arthur was a king in some time in Britain in around 300 AD.
Yeah, he was prominent in English literature, stories, folk tales, things like that. There have been different stories handed down through the generations, if you will, and written down, documented.
Yes. So Geoffrey combined stories of North Byrric prophet and madman Mydrin Wylot and Romano British war leader Ambrose Aurelianus.
Ambrose Aurelius.
Yes. Okay. And to create Merlin Ambrosius. That's what it was believed. But a lot of people do believe that Merlin may possibly have been a real person because of his prominent folklore in English literature.
And I could kind of see that, if you think about through history, there's a lot of different stories where people had a royal vizier. Back in that era, a lot of mysticism was believed, and anybody that had any knowledge of science could get people to believe that they were a magician and had magical powers, or even a wise counselor kind of thing, somebody who claimed to see the future. So it makes sense that some form of Merlin is based off a real person.
So the story of Merlin, though, is, he guided Arthur as a young boy and took him outside of the castle walls and taught him the ways of nature and knighthood and royalty, but without being corrupted within castle walls, which at the time it was very corrupt. He would make Arthur perform these miraculous acts of, the sword and the stone, just lots of different things to kind of give him this godly-like feature. And so that's why he became Merlin the Magician. He could supposedly make thunder come down whenever he wanted, or make it rain, or, control weather. He wanted Arthur to be the person who created Great Britain as we know it today, somebody who brought together the kingdoms of England, because at the time, England was separated into multiple kingdoms.
Yeah, was it what we know it now?
Yes, he wanted a king of kings. And so the origin, though, of Merlin has really been shrouded in mystery.
And just really quick, I believe it's Jeffrey, not Joffrey.
I'm saying Joffrey.
This is not Game of Thrones.
We're making it Joffrey. Yes, Jeffrey.
Making right. Joffrey great again.
So Merlin, though, was a child who was born without a father. His mother was a nun in several stories. There are other stories that she was just a beautiful woman. But in multiple accounts that she was an actual nun that fell asleep one night, and when she woke up, she had dreams of being pregnant. When she woke up, she knew she was pregnant with Merlin, and 9 months later, Merlin was born. Now, there in folklore and in mythology, there's this thing called an incubus, which is a demon
that sets you on fire, basically.
Well, yeah. it was a demon that would impregnate women in their sleep.
Oh, yes. Hello. I'm getting it mixed up. So, yes, you're right.
I'm thinking of no, that's not a succubus either.
You're thinking of a well, maybe this is
succubus is the female version, incubus is the male version, but eventually I think you're supposed to catch on fire. I don't know, or I'm just thinking of the Incubus song.
Not a 1990s
Turn into
band.
flames.
Can you please pay attention now? All right, I'm surprised you have music at your Bible camps.
Snuck it in. As you do.
So anyway, speaking of Bible camps, we're gonna get back to Merlin. Merlin. So the reason though that he had mythical powers was because he had a demon father and a demon father, but he was not evil because he was baptized due to his mother being and having religious faith. So it is
stories people would come up with to excuse pregnancies. Like, I didn't have sex. This is
she was a nun. She devoted herself to God, and that was a serious thing. So, but it's also believed that Arthur pretty much had conceived the plan to have Arthur born before Arthur was born, made it so that a child without royal blood could be born but not raised in a castle. And a lot of times it was just, with him having these mythical powers, it was viewed as, think of simple-minded people who don't know things, and we don't have movies and stuff. So when you see something like that, it's just a magician, somebody who's viewed as kind of godlike or, whatever. Well, we've seen it throughout history. All of these characters who have mythical powers, they're human-like, but they can do unhuman-like things. And so my conspiracy theory...
people think that they're all-powerful.
My conspiracy theory to this, though, Merlin might have been an alien.
Ooh, how so? Where do you get that theory from?
Well, like I said, it's simple-minded people at the time. Okay, yes, they were scholars and educated, but you didn't have when you saw creatures that looked like humans but weren't human, like you could tell they weren't human. You created demons and angels and multiple different types of mythological characters. That is the only way you could perceive it and make it and rationalize it to yourself. So if Merlin's mother was, for lack of a better term, raped by a demon in her sleep, well, what would a demon end up being? If we saw a demon nowadays,
alien,
it could be an alien.
Yeah, this is true. So that's a good point. That could be. So there's that concept that maybe Merlin was an alien, but even if he was born, part alien, how did he get special powers? Is that part of his alien DNA?
Of course, that's part of the alien DNA. Mm-hmm. By an ordinary man who can do extraordinary things,
like convincing giants to build Stonehenge. That's a theory about Merlin that I found.
So Merlin is actually believed to have created Stonehenge himself because there were stories that he could levitate objects.
But there's also theories that he convinced a giant to help him build it. So it depends on which maybe they work together.
Well, maybe, but okay. Think of a giant. Yes, people think, oh my God, somebody taller than a building. But if they saw a man who was 8 or 9 foot tall, wouldn't you not consider that a giant?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So what if Merlin was still in contact with aliens and they came down and they were much taller than humans? Because as most godlike figures are built up to have these giant statues and make men look puny, well, probably because they stood taller than humans.
So yeah, it's just a matter of perception. Were these aliens? Was Merlin an alien? Were these giants that were helping him actually alien family members or people coming to help him? And then what was the purpose of Stonehenge? That's another episode altogether.
We'll get into Stonehenge one day. But
not today.
It's just an interesting thing because Merlin is such shrouded in such mystery that was he real? Was he not real? Where did he come from? He was just viewed as a madman who lived in the forest that raised a child that became king of England.
Which is pretty close to Disney's version of The Sword and the Stone.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the art. I mean, that's what I'm saying. And throughout history, that's what he was viewed as.
And he could travel through time and all sorts of crazy stuff back in that version of it. So it's pretty
we're not talking about Disney, but
I know, but I'm saying that, I'm surprised Disney picked up on these different powers, if you will, of Merlin for the cartoon, like that he could time travel and make things just appear and disappear and that, which I guess kind of goes with that whole magical powers of being a magician. What's the point of being an all-powerful magician if you can't time travel too?
Yes. If you have extraterrestrial powers, why not make it just say it's magic and you're a wizard or a witch? Where did wizards and witch and why did terms of this come about? It's people that could do things that were unexplainable at the time.
Maybe Merlin was one of the homeless people that got sent back in time and decided to stay.
Yes,
we don't know.
He was.
Tying it to the Montauk Project there.
I see what you did there. I see what you did there. All right.
All full circle.
The Montage Project?
Montauk Project. It said Project Montauk.
You said montage. Cue the 80s music.
It's a montage. It's a montage.
Maniac.
Hey, if I can't sing Lionel Richie, you can't sing. Anyways, it's a montage of crazy conspiracies and different projects in that Montauk Project. Now you got me singing for real.
All right. I think that's about our little time we got for today.
Yeah. I think my brain needs some time to wrap around these conspiracy theories. I don't know about our listeners, but if you have any questions or comments or conspiracies you'd like to hear us talk about in the future and want Chris and I to look into, our email DSTM at thejustdon'tnetwork.com, or Chris, if you want to go directly to him, at thejustdon'tnetwork.com. You can also tweet Chris at
CDickens670.
And I'm at Say Hi Jinx. We'd love to hear from you, so please feel free to drop us a line and check out our Instagram, which we are working on getting up there for you guys, and visit thejustdon'tnetwork.com. That's all we have time for this week, and until next week,
as always, don't shoot us.
We're just the messengers. Pew, 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 pew.
Don't Shoot the Messenger is part of the Just Don't Network.